Now, with Grand Prix qualifying, Shanghai International Circuit hosts the second round of the championship in 2025. This is classic qualifying, a traditional session of attacking laps to set the grid over one whole hour. It is 5.4 kilometers, 3.3 miles. The Grand Prix will run to 56 laps, but it's performing with the low fuel that counts in the next hour of running. There are 7 meters of elevation, a lot of them at the first turn, that long right-hander that the drivers are having to think about so much. Many errors there in sprint qualifying earlier in the weekend. C4, C3 and C2 tyres are the ones that drivers have available to them. This is a look behind the main grandstand and now into the main grandstand at a venue that has seen so many fans make their way in on what is a gloriously sunny day at Shanghai International Circuit. Talking to you from the 9th floor of this massive grandstand, and we are seeing the weather conditions beautifully poised for another attacking session. Track temperature is 40 degrees, air temperature is 26 degrees. The average in March, first time the Chinese Grand Prix has been held in March, is 15. And I think maybe at the start of the weekend, teams, drivers perhaps caught out by the difference in temperature and the grippy, smooth tarmac. And as if by magic, there's the shot to show you that the Shanghai International Circuit has been completely resurfaced. As we go now into the second qualifying session of the weekend, the full original 1 hour session, teams and drivers, they've had a long time to learn what they've got underneath them in terms of temperature and the racetrack. As you will have heard in the build-up, all about keeping that front left tyre alive, and do the teams at the front bias their setups into a race pace, knowing that Formula One is in this incredible situation where it is ultra competitive. Do you risk lining up, if you're one of the big 4 teams, with maybe an 8th position with it all to do, given how tough it's been to pass on the evidence of the sprint race? And as if by magic, there's the winner of the sprint race. Timing this beautifully right now in the gallery. Lewis Hamilton was emotional yesterday to take a sprint pole, was delighted to get that first Ferrari win on the board. He did so, creates a little bit of history, but Lewis Hamilton will want even more. He's got 6 pole positions around this circuit. He's got 6 wins. He's now got a sprint win. He's now got a sprint pole. Shanghai, as he said in the press conference afterwards, has been good to him. And what was interesting for me is when he was talking in the press conference afterwards, he said in Melbourne, he turned up to Ferrari and he looked around, he observed, and he tried to understand how they operated, because in his view, and even when he's 40 years of age, he's saying in his view, there might be something I could learn, something I could understand. He comes into round 2, he said he approached it differently. He came in with a list of things that he wanted addressed. He's had a better feel since the first and only practice session. He's taken sprint pole, he's taken the sprint win, and now Jolyon Palmer, we do it all over again. Reset to 0, 18 minutes on the board, and we find ourselves with Grand Prix qualifying ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think reset to 0 is the big thing, isn't it, really? The amount of times last year we had someone being a hero in the sprint, and then the race weekend would just go away. Hamilton is one of them. Last year led the sprint race, didn't win it, but had a great showing and was knocked out in Q1 later that day last year. Daniel Ricciardo in Miami, hero in the sprint. It all went away from him. Max Verstappen in Qatar struggled in the sprint, won the race at a canter, the Grand Prix in the end from pole position, or the front row of the grid. So it can all change. Let's see what's going to unfold here.
That's Jolyon Palmer, former Renault Formula One driver, who had a couple of races around this circuit. And the first ever Grand Prix held around here was back in 2004, which means also DC's had a couple of races around this circuit as well. Gentlemen, where did it rank in your favourites? Was it at the higher end or the lower end?
I'm going to go middle end, in that it was challenging in its own way. Long corners normally are a little bit frustrating for race drivers, because Grand Prix cars, they come alive at high speed, and you want to be staring down a 180 mile an hour corner and making that decision. Do I stay flat? Do I lift? which you don't really get as you enter turn 1 here, and then it just gets progressively slower, which means less downforce and more tricky to control the car as you get into turn 2. But I just think brilliant to be in China. We're going to have a true World Championship. We've got to be in all the major places.
Yeah, it was right down the lower end for me, to be honest. For all those
I did
reasons
see that up
GC
knowing where he
mentioned.
was going as well. That's my fault.
I have to say, I wish it had been resurfaced like this for when I was driving, though, because I think it would make the track a lot more enjoyable to drive, smoothing it out, adding a load of grip as well. Not to say it's easy, those long corners are still so difficult, and I didn't get on with them well. I had 2 miserable Grand Prix here, but I'm really pleased to be here commentating now.
It's interesting. I think the smoother surface has played a part because the current drivers in the field seem to enjoy this place in a way that maybe others didn't in the past, and we'll see what we get here. The car's getting faster, of course, every year. That never hurts. More grip, more power, and a green light at the end of the pit lane. Q1 is underway. Plenty of drivers trying to turn the page on their weekend so far. This is the strange combination of having a race before midday local time and then almost reversing back in the weekend to go back to low fuel, 1 lap pushing to the limits, DC.
But isn't this brilliant for the drivers? Because every session has consequence. Fridays, when you're working on your programs and everyone's got their own strategy of fuel level, engine modes and the likes, we're all left wondering, well, who's hot, who's not? We know who was quick this morning. We know who, in a 19-lap race, all on the same tyres, was able to manage that on that day as best they could. What we don't know is, now armed with all that information, who is the fastest 1-lap specialist? Because I think qualifying is a lot more important here than maybe you would think, given how wide open this racetrack is.
Well, given what we saw earlier on, Hamilton getting that clear air from pole and then commanding the race, I think we've got 2 things, haven't we? If we just did sprint qualifying yesterday, stopped it at the checker flag and told them all to go again, I bet we'd have a completely shuffled up order because of how close it is. On top of that, we've now had the teams being able to change the cars in the couple of hours since the sprint. So everyone can learn their weaknesses, learn what they want to do for the race. So the pack's going to be even more shuffled, I'd have thought.
That is the weird thing about Formula One, a sport that prides itself in the highest of tolerances, or the smallest of tolerances, and the highest level of engineering. There's so many variables in putting a lap together. Where are the surface temperature of the tyres? Where are the pressures? Do you have dirty air ahead? Is the wind gusting? You know, these guys are like the Princess and the Pea, just the tiniest of little change. You know, sand under their derriere and the seat, and it changes their whole connection with the car and the racetrack.
And not to diminish Hamilton's achievements, because he's been sensational this weekend. The best of Lewis Hamilton. Doing.
Jack Doohan off the road, the Alpine driver who had contact at the hairpin at the end of the sprint race, finds himself with a moment off at the start of qualifying. That would have been his first push lap in the session.
So that was in the middle sector, I think, for Doohan, through the faster corners. We'll wait for a replay on that. But just finishing the point on Hamilton, it was 18 thousandths that he took pole by over Verstappen. Piastri was third within a tenth. And for all the things that can go right or wrong, it doesn't take much different today. And he's not starting from pole, he can't control the race. And that's what everyone's got to try and get their gear into, not least this guy, Lando Norris, who could have had a completely different weekend up until this point had he not locked up at turn 14. Small mistakes have big consequences now.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a point where people go, well, look, we'll not worry about qualifying, we'll focus on the race. You know, the most extreme version, I guess, would be Monaco, where you focus on qualifying, and then if you've managed to be quick enough to be at the front, then that's a pretty good indication you're going to be able to be competitive in the race. But I think you're absolutely right. What we've seen this morning, track position, absolutely key.
They will be aware of how difficult it was to keep the tyres alive in dirty air. And all the drivers, as DC points out, always aiming for the front row. We have a really nice balance in modern times of Formula One, with 4 teams providing machinery capable of challenging for for pole position. Lewis Hamilton has set the early pace. He's driving with supreme confidence right now, and he is in a McLaren sandwich. Oscar Piastri, who missed out on sprint pole by 0.08 of a second, is ahead of Hamilton, and then it is Norris in third, Gasly in fourth, Ocon in fifth. This is Jack Doohan working his way into the middle part of the lap, out of 9 and spinning backwards through 10.
Yeah, that just has a sort of look and feel to what we saw in Melbourne. Tyres clearly just not quite there at the lower speed where the downforce has come off the car. It seems to be rolling onto the grass is not ideal to sort of compound the difficulties. We see Charles Leclerc doing a Lando Norris at turn 14. So, Jolene, just explain what it is with these cars in quali as we see him pumping the brake, creating his own ABS. Why does it seem to be this momentum of the rear coming round as the speed comes off that we've seen Melbourne and then now there with Jack?
Well, I think it's even more now because everyone's got to set the car up so it's on the nose, so it's not understeering to try and protect the front tyres. And it was a bit the case in Melbourne. Front tyres were quite vulnerable with the high speed there, but this is another issue here. So everyone's been thinking about, particularly we're talking earlier on about do you set the car up for race or qualifying. To set the car up for a better race, you have to take load off the front left, which is to induce some more rear instability effectively. You can't have the perfect balance of just more grip everywhere. You have to find a trade-off. And I think that is to have a bit more oversteer, to fight the rear more, maybe over one lap, but then over many laps, it'll sort of even itself out and you won't chew through that front left quite as much.
Well, we're joining Verstappen as he goes to set his opening lap time. 10th down in the first sector. It seems to be, and we saw that certainly in the sprint quali yesterday, not as comfortable rolling into the lower speed corners. Ferrari seemed to be most comfortable there. Middle sector, well, not too bad. 27.5. Russell currently is the fastest person at this phase, so he's about a 10th down on Russell.
And speaking of the Brits, Lando Norris has had his time deleted. So that first run in Q1, he went beyond the white line at turn 9, and he has his 1:32.0 deleted. No lap time on the board. Again, story of Norris's weekend. Good pace, just no consistency across the entirety of the lap, and the lap time's in the bin.
He's struggling badly to put laps together. So that's the same corner as Jack Doohan had his spin early on as Verstappen lowers the benchmark again by another 10th. Good final sector for him. Norris more than anyone. We know he's got speed. He's always a threat to go top or going top, but he's making a lot of mistakes.
Final corner of the racetrack, Kimi Antonelli, sensational debut for him 1 week ago, and dipping a wheel in a corner that has bitten rookies in the past.
Yeah, your voice told that story, even if you weren't watching the actual visuals. It's such a knife edge, isn't it, when you see a Grand Prix car? That was that running beyond track limits. What's a little bit harsh there is it clearly doesn't give you any performance gain.
Yeah, and with the way that the circuits are generally going now, we're getting more and more gravel to the edge of the tracks. We're moving away from just big expanses of asphalt runoff. So we saw it last week as well, didn't we, with people running through the gravel but actually losing a lap time. We're not needing necessarily to be quite as harsh with the rules on many circuits, but they are the rules. So Norris loses the lap, but I have to say it was super marginal, just understeering his way through 9. So exactly the opposite of the issue that Doohan found.
So Doohan going again. Sainz trying to find some balance. Isaac Hadjar with the fastest middle sector of anyone so far. Driver who had his Formula 1 debut in the sprint race earlier on after failing to start the Australian Grand Prix. Finds himself in 4th place. Doohan completing his first lap, having had the spin on the exit of turn number 9. Tsunoda puts 2 Racing Bulls 4th and 5th. So they're all trying to take what they've learned through the session so far this weekend and the 19-lap race that we had earlier. And Doohan sets the 13th fastest time. Sainz was a driver who didn't understand the balance of his Williams earlier on, in sharp contrast to what we've seen with Alex Albon, who has been comfortable behind the wheel. Driver who finished 11th earlier on in the sprint race, good enough to go ahead of Fernando Alonso and into 6th. There's a lot of spotlight on Liam Lawson, a young New Zealander working the wheel through turn 16, not glued to the road in the way that he would want, and he's 15th with first effort.
I just looked very tentative into that final corner there. plenty of coast as he came off the brakes, couldn't commit to a turn in particularly well. But the important thing for Lawson is just to get a banker lap in and then try and find something more on the second. I have to say it's not a great banker because he's right on the cusp of being knocked out, and that's not including Leclerc and Norris, who are right at the bottom of the times. So now he is in the bottom 5 again, so it's not really enough that he's done there.
No, a banker needs to be within a few attempts of Max Verstappen. A second, there isn't a second between any of these drivers. And therefore, if there is a second, he's either had a technical issue around the lap, or it's frightened money. It's you know, he's driving fingertips scared, and he's not relying on the instincts that's brought him to this point.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to get through for his own confidence this session, I think. Having had the learnings of yesterday, the brief learnings of an SQ1, but then the laps in the sprint, he has to be getting through into Q2 this time. And he knows the pressure's there, I think, now.
Yeah, look, it's not just about getting through for confidence, it's getting through for career. The spotlight of performance is on these guys every weekend now.
Nice lap for Oliver Behrman, moves into 7th position. Hulkenberg was a driver who was very happy in the early stages of Friday, lost the pace when others stepped forward in sprint qualifying. He's in 8th at the moment, Alonso is in 9th and 10th. Then we go into the danger zone with Bortoletto, who has been the lead Sauber in both of the qualifying sessions so far this year. Stroll in 12th, and it's Ocon, Gasly and Sainz on the bubble. In the drop zone right now, Antonelli, Lawson, Doohan, and the driver we're riding on board with.
Yeah, this isn't what you call epic lap at the moment. It's sort of tantalisingly close enough to appear like he's trying to do a lap, but in terms of performance, it's looking like it's growing towards being a second off Verstappen's time.
Yeah, losing a lot of time in that first sector, Charles Leclerc, in comparison to Lando Norris, has just gone through it 0.4 of a second quicker with the fastest so far. Only 10th for Charles Leclerc. A lot of time left on the table there.
He's going to want to hurry round to the pits because that's not enough for Leclerc either. Not enough for him at the moment. Same set of tyres. He's going to have to put on a new set of boots and improve on that one. Norris is going better, was going better through the first sector.
Still, a bit of movement through that final corner. DRS open. Lando Norris looking for a time that can take him through. 6th for the British driver. And in the background, Antonelli going again, because he needs to, and he finds the 3rd fastest time. That's exactly what the young Italian teenager needed.
It's not a brilliant lap for Norris either. We just joined him for the final corner, having a bit of a snap through the apex. He dropped a few tenths to Isaac Hadjar in the middle sector. Hadjar is the fastest of all. We might find out why here at turn 6. He's running out of road, and he's running out of traction coming out of that corner.
Yeah, they seem to be comfortable to what I would call overspeed the entry phase and compromise a bit the line on exit. Didn't sound like he lifted as he ran over the curb, but it's certainly not ideal for traction.
Norris can't be safe with that. I know he's just jumped up into 7th place.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Jolene, you saw there, he turned in, lost the rear, opened the steering, and big hesitation.
Yeah, so that's why he can't feel safe. This is Lawson's lap going a little bit pear-shaped at the second corner there. All part of the first turn, really. 1 and 2 together, slowing it through the right. Then you're scrabbling around on the exit as well, so that's why that's messy, and he's 19th. Norris in 7th is 2 tenths inside the drop zone.
Yeah, it's so tight. That's modern Formula One. Just when we had that on board with Lawson, if anyone wants to see how that first sector should be driven, you just need to go on board of any of Lewis Hamilton's laps. He doesn't fight the car, he doesn't try and over hustle it, you know, he's got the patience to let the car roll as the speed comes off, and that's key to him being quick through there.
Liam Lawson does have a chance. He was noted by race control for failing to slow under yellow flag. He's been cleared of that. No further investigation required, so if he can find a lap time, he will go through, but momentarily a bit of concern down in the Red Bull garage. The only yellow flags we've had so far have been for Liam Lawson spinning at turns 9 and 10. Very slow coast across the line for a number of drivers. Not seeing anything waved out of the commentary box window, but the driver's really backing off on that main straight.
So Leclerc was on a new set of tyres when he did his time. It just wasn't a great lap, so he's doing a double cool to give himself a chance. I think there's a big threat of a top-line driver going out here with the mess that we're seeing, the tight times. Norris scampering back to the pits, is he? Or is he staying out there? It's tricky for everyone.
On board with Hamilton, and is he going to defy what I said about there you go, commentary curse.
Any of the laps but that one.
That one.
It's all right, we'll edit it out, it's fine.
You don't need to be a hardcore racer to see oversteer when the gloves appear at the top of the cockpit. That is massive opposite lock.
It's a very long first turn. So many drivers getting that snap of oversteer all the way through. Now that's the engineer, Ricky, that you hear on the radio. Once speaking to Carlos Sainz, now speaking to Lewis Hamilton. They were arguing over track position in the background. They're still arguing over track position in the background. Lewis Hamilton, Gabriel Bortoleto, Fernando Alonso as well. Drivers under pressure, everyone really has to step forward here. Current drop zone is Ocon, Gasly, Sainz, Lawson and Doohan. So Doohan was the lead Alpine in sprint qualifying, but Ocon has just not got on well with that Haas at the start of the year. Gasly went out in the first part of qualifying and then seemed much happier in race trim, didn't he, earlier on? But Alpine staring at a double Q1 exit across the weekend. We know about Liam Lawson. Can he find a lap time to change the narrative of his season? And if Carlos Sainz didn't understand the Williams yesterday, he doesn't seem to have the answers. Driver who had good underlying pace over one lap in Melbourne, down in 18th.
And George, just so it is clear, we do need this next lap.
Yeah, they've got one lap. Everyone has one lap here, and Formula One covered all cars by just over a second.
Russell, Leclerc and Norris, three of the front runners, have all done a lap on new tyres already. They're on the same tyres, and that's why he's being told there by his engineer Marcus Dudley, you've got to do it this lap. They've been going around slowly, waiting for the final one, cooling the tyres, but they don't have the bite of a new set of tyres. They've already used them.
So Verstappen is in the pit lane. Everyone else is out there either learning or looking over their shoulders. You have to improve your time right now, and that means finding a balance around the 16 turns of Shanghai International. The track runs to 3.3 miles, 5.4 kilometers. Alonso's gone early, and you can see how much he's improving. His time is being compared to Max Verstappen right now. The track will take a sizable step forward.
Yeah, as everyone started their lap, as we just get to the final seconds, is anyone not going to get across the line? Ocon just crossing the line now.
And he needs to, because he's in the drop zone, and he does not want to have this narrative forming of Oliver Behrman. So Behrman didn't get over the line. Hulkenberg finds himself in 7th at the moment. Alonso and Charles Leclerc pretty similar through the first sector. How does it develop through sector 2? Two-time world champion across the line to 6th place.
So Behrman's in huge trouble. That's a real error from Haas not getting him out.
Charles Leclerc now finds himself into turn 16. He's not looked comfortable all the way through. He's been the second slowest Ferrari all the way through the weekend, and now he's second in the order. Lap when it counts. For the man from Monaco, Charles Leclerc into second. Yuki Tsunoda goes past our commentary box, and he's fastest in a Racing Bull, next to George Russell, who's dropped down to 14th position, told by his engineer that this is the lap, that he needs it. He too delivers up to 2nd place.
Norris shuffled down to 12th, but he's just behind and should be about to leap up the order as well. Hadjar goes to the top. The times are shuffling like a pack of cards.
Isaac Hadjar didn't take the start a week ago. He was momentarily fastest. He's been replaced by Lando Norris at the front. Drivers under pressure found a lap time, including Carlos Sainz, who improved enormously there when he needed to. His teammate goes into 6th position. In the drop zone and heading out is Gabriel Bortoleto. Gasly is down there. Went out in sprint qualifying 1, doesn't want the same thing again. He's on the brink, he's in 15th.
And Hamilton is not on the lap here, finds himself down in 11th.
Lawson is down in 19th, make that 20th. Esteban Ocon finds the time. Gasly improved, but is now demoted again by his old teammate. Behrman didn't get a chance to respond. Doohan goes out, Bortoleto goes out, and once again, when you get the stopwatch out, inexplicably, it's Liam Lawson in the Red Bull who's at the back of the pack.
He improved all 3 sectors. Lawson, we saw the end of his first lap on board, and it didn't look like he was absolutely on the ragged edge.
This was the fighting to get the lap in. This was the fighting to get on with it. And Behrman, who was the lead Haas ahead of Esteban Ocon before that first run, dropping down to 17th. In the end, Pierre Gasly missed out by 0.06 of a second. That's the difference between going through and going out.
Yeah, there was the biggest of car parks in the pit lane, and in the end, if you're way down the end of that line, you start running out of options. Not getting across the line before checkered flag, that's inexcusable. communication between engineer and race driver.
Yeah, for a team that had a back row lockout in Melbourne, albeit pulled Bearman into the pits to start, just need to get the cars on track to be able to do the lap, and actually Bearman has been the quicker of the two, but he's out. Gasly will be fuming to be out in Q1 as well after yesterday. Both Alpines not making it through. The one I'm just bemused by is Lawson.
Yeah, this is a psychologist's textbook scenario to do analysis on.
Well, part of the reason that he was put in the Red Bull is because of his bullishness, and we saw that when he jumped in last year, as he looked like he was taking no prisoners in the midfield, wheel to wheel with Perez, and his feisty, aggressive mentality that the Red Bull management thought was going to suit them for that second car. But I just can't explain how he could be 7/10 away from Max Verstappen doing one lap on a used tyre in that session. Max didn't have to go back out, he was safely through.
Last year, Liam Lawson out-qualified 6-0 by Yuki Tsunoda, the driver who is third in that session behind Isaac Hadjar. What a difference 6 days make. Tears of anguish for Hadjar in Melbourne, the second fastest time in Q1 in Shanghai.
Right, the perplexing thing is, you've got Hadjar second, Tsunoda third. So Lawson's sitting there in the Red Bull that he was chuffed to get called up to, and he must just look at his former team and think, what am I doing in this car?
Bad luck, you've been promoted. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Or are you thinking he's going to go back to Racing Bulls and say, I'll have that back, please?
Too stressful, guys. Just a stay chill. I was confident with the plan I said before. It just puts too much pressure on us all.
Too stressful sums up the weekend so far. It's been manic out there with these sprint formats. George Russell just giving a note of operation to the team there.
Yeah, it's difficult when cars are just circulating. Some of them are on out laps, some of them have already done flying laps like Russell. He's trying to find his own space. And sometimes he can be flapping in the garage. The drivers obviously just need a bit of calmness.
Okay, let's go to Alex Brundle for a look at the headline of Q1.
Interesting one, isn't it, gents? You've got the RBs up there setting purple sectors up in the top three, and then Liam Lawson, as you've said, really languishing. I'm just in the paddock here, waiting for the drivers who are out in Q1 to rock up. But let's have a look through the lap of Lawson and see what we can spot here. So, neat and tidy, out of the final corner, 1.1 seconds adrift. And of course, out in the first part of qualifying, slightly tentative through that first apex. And to me, it just looks like he's just behind the speed that he needs to be taking through, just the attack that he needs to be taking through that first apex of the lap. The word you used, JP, through the final corner was tentative, and the whole lap looks tentative. Again, rolling out of the throttle, rolling into the brake. There's not that brake impact and the chassis thrown forward like you see when Verstappen is attacking that braking zone down at 6. Carries decent speed into 7, but then look, slightly out of position on his way into turn 8, and a bit of an inkling through the middle of 8. You see the little shimmy on the steering wheel there? He's just not comfortable in the balance. As he makes his way through the exit of turn 10 there, not happy to crank the steering wheel again and really lean on the outside rear tyre. But the line is just not quite super sharp for Lawson all the way around the lap, and I think it is indicative of a driver who is feeling the pressure firstly, but also just doesn't appear to have total confidence every time he turns the steering wheel, which we've been talking about it all weekend. In these long corners, you have to have the confidence that as you load the tyre more and more and more, the rear's not going to just snap on you late in the corner. This is the final corner that we saw with him when we jumped onto his lap and saw him cross the line. And as you can see, he again, not happy to crank the steering wheel, little bit tentative, you know, and it's a driver who, every time he's attacked that car, every time he's gone for it, there's been an error there, and I think it's playing out in that qualifying performance.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the analysis there, and a poignant graphic and a poignant message on the Aston Martin, remembering one of Formula One's great characters, Eddie Jordan, who passed away earlier in the week. Max Verstappen is the sole remaining Red Bull in the session. Liam Lawson is finding himself with the slowest time in both sessions as well. And the driver from New Zealand who has worked so hard to get to Formula One, enduring a really tough time at the moment and searching for answers. We talked about how difficult that second Red Bull seat has become. Lawson, after just 11 Grand Prix, promoted to the senior team, given the chance. Alex Albon was given an opportunity after 12 races and had a season and a bit before he was dropped. Sergio Perez was brought in. Perez obviously winning races with the team. He won 5 Grand Prix with Red Bull, but again the performance disappearing. New race engineer again for Liam Lawson, and at the moment the engineering side of the garage and the driver unable to find a way out of Q1. This is Q2. We have a green light at the end of the pit lane. We have 15 cars remaining. The 5 to fall, Gasly, Behrman. Behrman was an operational error. Doohan makes it 2 Alpines out in 2 Q1s across the weekend, SQ1 and original qualifying Q1. And then Gabriel Bortoleto, first time in his time, 3 sessions with the team, he's been the slowest of the Sauber drivers. And Liam Lawson, who we've spoken about, looking for answers and looking for space on the racetrack. Plenty of drivers queued up right now, waiting. They're all slowly making their way out of the pit.
So at the end of Q1 there, the big guns all got through. Hamilton was sliding down towards 11th position, and there was a point where I wasn't sure if he'd definitely be safe. That's how things can change. He had a similar run at it as everyone else, got some laps on the board, and now can have a reset. Looked like he was on a scrub set of tyres as he was, or is about to be released from the garage at Ferrari. But it's just a scramble, isn't it, at the end, especially when everyone waits for the last moment there. Now you can reset, look at some data, make some tweaks to the car, and try and collect your thoughts. With five cars out of it already, you get a bit more space.
Well, I challenge you to name any other championship that the grid is this tight. 1 week championships don't have the grid covered by a second.
Yeah, Q1 has become unbelievably difficult because the standard required, there's no allowance. I mean, we talked about this a week ago when you used to have pole positions decided by over a second, and now we've got the entirety of the grid almost glued together. It means that big names are always at risk. The same applies for this session as well. We've lost 1 Red Bull, and if we were in many other years, we'd expect that to be the case. It's Red Bull's second decade of competition. They're celebrating 20 years. They've had the championships, 4 drivers' championships with Sebastian Vettel, 4 of them with Max Verstappen. Verstappen this year trying to be only the 2nd driver in the history of the championship, along with Michael Schumacher, to win 5 in a row. But at the moment, they can't find a way to get that 2nd Red Bull into Q2.
Yeah, it is a mystery, and the debate will go on. Do Red Bull build a car for 1 driver? And actually saw Christian Horner being challenged on that this weekend. What is it that Max wants from a car? And he explains that it's just so much front end. He asks for more and more and more front end. And well, as Julian knows well, a nervous rear is one of the most difficult things to deal with if that's not your thing. And it wasn't my thing. So, you know, it just makes it so tricky when you commit at speed to know how far is the rear going to move. And with the size of these cars and the momentum that then moves in the roll before you actually get that sort of set point. You know, there's always that point from when you input the steering to the car taking its set, and it may only be a few milliseconds, but it's the difference between absolute confidence, absolute commitment, and absolute fear.
Drivers are out there setting their first laps in the session. George Russell going out early, and George Russell assuming the role of team leader. We're looking at his teammate first of all to set the time, and then Russell's a few meters back on the road. Kimi Antonelli is the first Mercedes to cross the line. 18-year-old from northern Italy, DRS open, and goes, as you would expect, with the first push lap ahead of Esteban Ocon, and a direct comparison between rookie and experienced hand, and there's 0.2 of a second between the two of them on the first runs in Q2. But the Racing Bulls have found a balance, haven't they? Because they're right in the mix when it comes to taking on the Mercedes. This is visor cam through the final corner. Let's see what sort of time it is for Isaac Hadjar, and it fell away at the end there. He'll be disappointed because his teammate going really nicely in the first 2 sectors of the racetrack. Yuki Tsunoda, who got points earlier on, 6th place for him, holding off Kimi Antonelli. And Antonelli was there all race long. Japanese driver has 1 corner to go, and now he is going to show us the pace of that car, and the pace of that car is quicker than one of the Mercedes in the field. 2nd place for him.
Yeah, that great visor cam that we had with Hadjar also gave us driver disappointment cam head shake as he went across the line, saw the time, and as you mentioned, it fell away just in the end. He's a driver that absolutely thrives on his emotion, as we saw in the long walk back in Melbourne.
Yeah, you don't have to guess with Isack Hadjar. You know how he is feeling. Lando Norris has set a scorching time out there. Go 0.4 of a second faster than Oscar Piastri, and Charles Leclerc is going to show us what his Ferrari has got, applying a little bit of opposite lock as he got the power down out of 14. Driver who was on the back foot in Q1 earlier on, and he finds himself down in 7th. Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc out of the box, miles off the benchmark time set by the 2 McLarens. Max Verstappen's going to join this party right now with the 3rd fastest time, and he is 0.4 of a second off Lando Norris's best.
Norris's lap is scorching. That's the fastest lap ever done around this circuit that he's just pumped in. Fastest in all 3 sectors. He's hooked it up, and it'll be interesting to see if he can keep it hooked up now for the rest, because that pace looks unmatchable at this stage. The caveat is Russell wasn't on a new tyre there, and nor were the 2 Ferraris, so that's why they're a little bit further down than the rest. But Norris, compared to Piastri and Verstappen, a long way clear, and finally puts a lap together.
I guess unsurprisingly, Hamilton, with that confidence coming from the sprint victory, again being lead in terms of pace at Ferrari. Leclerc, no point this weekend through free practice or anything else, has really looked on top of his Ferrari.
Chasing a balance and chasing an understanding. An incredibly strong qualifier usually. 26 times he's taken pole position in his Formula One career. 2nd most in team history, only behind Michael Schumacher, as they are, finding themselves heading back to the pit lane. So the order for you: Lando Norris ahead of Oscar Piastri, McLaren 1-2, then it's Verstappen, Russell, Tsunoda, Antonelli, Hamilton, Albon, again Albon in the top 10. Charles Leclerc again chasing the balance, but as Jolien pointed out for you, no fresh tyres for the Ferraris. So we've got an incomplete picture which finishes with Hülkenberg in 10th, and then it's Stroll in 11th, Ocon, Hadjar, who had a mistake on his lap, time fell away, so he knows what his teammate is capable of, and he knows what he did in Q1 when he was ahead with the 2nd fastest time. Last 2, Spanish pair of Alonso and Sainz.
Hamilton then stranded in the pit lane because he's just been pushed onto the weighbridge.
The dreaded weighbridge, random, can be pulled in at any time during the entire weekend, but sometimes it can upset your run plan.
Absolutely, it's frustrating. Of course, it's just a necessity of the FIA to make sure that cars are running legal at all points during qualifying, and of course they get to do that after the race. But as a driver, you want to get back to the pits, download with your engineers, have the tyre pressures checked as well. All of these little touch points that just give you the confidence you're building the session the way you would like it to be.
And actually that didn't take too long for Hamilton. That was pretty efficient there from the FIA and the mechanics to get him fired up. But it's also not ideal that he gets pulled in when he needs to do a lap on the next one. It's easier if you're Norris and you've just done a great lap to just relax a little bit, you know you're safely through, whereas Lewis will want to be doing what Nico Hülkenberg's doing and looking at a printout of how he can find a bit more time and go quicker now. Needs to unlock that little bit. We know he can do it because he's done it already this weekend, but the pressure of one lap coming up for both Ferraris.
It's a wonderful pressure though. It's the magic moment. You do not get a faster opportunity. As you mentioned, some have been out on scrub tyres as they're just finding their way into this middle part of qualifying. But when we get to the final top 10 shootout, there is no more beautiful feeling on a racetrack. New tyres, max engine, track as good as it's going to get. That's not a pressure, that's a pleasure.
We're going to see some more flying laps now. These are the fastest ever laps of Shanghai International Circuit, a venue used for the first time in Formula One history back in 2004. A new surface. It is grippy, it is fast, it is smooth. And it's great for us because trackside we're able to see the drivers on the edge. I feel like we've been here before, earlier in the weekend, with Lando Norris miles clear of everyone. It's just, can he carry it all the way through the session now and deliver the underlying pace? Story of McLaren's weekend, clearly that car is fast, but it's been all over the road and difficult to contain for the 3 miles of Shanghai.
Yeah, I think that the drivers talk now about, in this modern era of Formula One, a lot of aero performance coming from the underside of the car, getting it in the window where you've got the tyres optimised, the surface temperature, where you end up with your pressures, depending what you've decided for your outlaps. There's so many variables that if you do hit that sweet spot, you then get what is a sizable lap time difference at this point. I don't expect it to be as much once it all comes out in the wash at the end, but this is a great confidence inspiring opening lap from Norris there, and Piastri is probably sitting there looking at the data going, okay, I can see where that performance is coming from, and there's probably somewhere on the lap where he's thinking, I'm not sure I can do that.
He's gone back out on a scrub tyre now, Piastri, so he's not gone for a new tyre as we jumped on board with him there, cruising round an outlap because the temperatures are so hot now. Keeping those tyres cool on the outlap is key, but he obviously wants to try and figure out how he can do something different from the cockpit before Q3. The McLarens should be safe with what they've done, unlike plenty of the others towards the bottom end, and Antonelli looked like he was starting that lap, but will bail and go for another one.
Had a moment in the first turn and gets out of the way because his teammate is about to charge through. Another driver getting to the end of the first turn, having the correction of oversteer and knowing the lap is gone, bail out, call the tyres, recharge and go again. Antonelli currently finds himself in 6th position, but with the Ferraris yet to bolt on a new set of soft tyres. George Russell heading through the fast stuff through 7 and 8.
Yeah, just listening on board, they're absolutely flat as he went through the left of 7. Flicks it down the gears, and as the speed comes off, the car becomes a bit more tricky to position and manage, but definitely as he done 24.2 in that first sector, which is still about 3/10 down, so more performance to come, and likewise in the middle sector. So this is still really about feeling where the car is at.
The magic is stuck.
Okay.
So maybe that is what happened to Antonelli then, the old brake magic.
Brake magic, I haven't heard that for a couple of years. Button on the steering wheel, affects the temperatures and affects your performance, certainly through a turn like turn 1. From turn 1 to turn 16, George Russell needing a lap time to comfortably book his place in the next part of qualifying. Was on for about 2nd after 2/3 of the lap. Time falling away, he remains in 4th. Lewis Hamilton, fastest middle sector of anyone so far. Everyone has had a chance to reset the cars. Parc Fermé has been lifted. They've had a chance to change, to implement what they learned in sprint qualifying and the sprint race earlier on, and Hamilton is still rapid.
Yeah, but considering he's done the fastest middle sector, it shows what he's lost in the first, and he was fighting the car coming through 12 and 13 as well, where Leclerc is right now on the left-hand side of your picture. Hamilton with 2 corners to go, picking it up, and this will be a handy improvement still for him to launch him towards the sharp end.
Charles Leclerc down in 10th position, driver at risk as we progress from Q2 to Q3. Hamilton up to 6th place. Again, not a lot being found in that 3rd sector at the moment. Charles Leclerc is pushing on. Zhou Guanyu is the 3rd driver for Ferrari this year. He's been cheered all the way around this racetrack with fan appearances, and Charles Leclerc goes ahead of Lewis Hamilton up to 6th place.
Both of the Ferraris looking like they'd run out of grip come this final corner here that we join Ocon. There was no obvious signs of any issue under braking at the hairpin, maybe a bit squirrely, as you mentioned, Julian, through 11, 12, 13.
Ocon's given himself a chance. Hadjar gets the lap that he needs. He's up to 4th.
The Ferraris are not safe. Hamilton's dropping down with that lap, and so many drivers further back are looking to improve, and we're looking at 3 of them on the bottom of the times. This is Antonelli.
Ocon's in the drop zone, so is Hülkenberg. The Aston Martin pair of Stroll and Alonso and Sainz, hoping for a lap that just works in a way that no other has so far this weekend. Antonelli felt the need to go again after a mistake through turn number 1, had to bail out of it. Can he get near his teammate? Can he get anywhere close? No, he's at risk. Alex Albon is currently in 10th, but Antonelli is vulnerable in 9th position. Fernando Alonso is rotating his Aston Martin through the final corner. Not enough pace though. The Astons are out, 13th and 14th, and now Sainz is across the line, and he still can't find a tune from that Williams. His teammate has managed to get into 10th position, but he is out in the second part of qualifying. Ocon, Hulkenberg, Alonso ahead of Stroll, and the man you are looking at, Carlos Sainz, the 5 to fall. Alex Albon makes it through. Kimi Antonelli is ahead of him. The Ferraris didn't have great overall pace, but they booked their place in Q3, and this is on board with the man who finished 6th in the Formula 2 Championship last year.
Yeah, carried massive amount of speed on the first phase, and then as you can see, the ripples, the bumps later in one blending into two, just couldn't hold the car and started correcting.
That was the first lap with Antonelli, wasn't it? Then he went again and was actually just 5 thousandths away from the best lap that he's done that's been enough to take him through. That is precisely the difference between him and Albon, who snuck through once again in 10th position. And the Ferraris, Hamilton pole yesterday, of course, fastest middle sector of anyone, sneaking through by a 10th.
Yeah, crazy all laps.
Okay, well that doesn't really, we need to get on to Alonso's engineer to ask him to expand on that. What was crazy? Was it traffic? Was it just generally getting everything into the window? And well, as we go on board, it's Albon. A lot of questions going into the year. Would he stand up to being challenged by a driver that's won Grand Prix? And on the basis of, well, 2 qualifying sessions, so far so good.
He was really relishing having a chance to prove himself up against a 4-time Grand Prix winner. He's done so much work behind the scenes to evaluate where he needs to improve. He says that off track, he's seen Sainz come into that team and been reminded that you need to keep on challenging, that you don't just accept that how it is how it is. And he's been very motivated by Sainz's appearance. Sainz is still trying to unlock the balance of that car, trying to understand how the Williams operates compared to the Ferrari. But Albon has had a fire lit underneath him. He's in Q3 again.
Yeah, I love your turn of phrase when you go, he's trying to find a tune on that Williams. I'll try not steal that too often. It's a great expression where, in the same way, the great musicians find something with their...
Yeah, he's just snuck in. No whisker.
God! God!
Yeah.
300ths is a luxury margin on this weekend. Yeah, punching the air as well.
It doesn't matter what the time difference is, as long as it's in your favour.
So he gets through and he's delighted to do so. But how about the turn of pace from the Racing Bulls? Isaac Hadjar said in the Thursday press conference he was so relieved this was a back-to-back. He said the most important thing for him is that he got another opportunity. After he was so disconsolate in Melbourne, he's turned up, and again, after 2 parts of qualifying, he's the lead Racing Bull.
Yeah, that car is clearly working well. And what was painful to watch in Melbourne, that emotional long walk back, not the only driver to make a mistake there, much more experienced guys dropped it during that challenging Grand Prix, but he's bounced back.
I clearly felt the change. Could have pushed more.
Well, that's the sort of thing you want to hear, a driver that realizes there's more potential, there's more opportunity.
Well, we have our top 10 order set. Before we get to Q3, let's get some analysis with Alex Brundle.
Nice to hear the fight from last year's Formula 2 Championship runner-up. We've had the 3 rookies that are out in Q1 through the pen. Lawson obviously looking dejected, doing a bit more calm. They know the situation down at Alpine with the rear wing change they have to make, and at least Gasly, his more experienced teammate, was out in Q1 as well. Bortoletto looking angry. You've got to remember that that's the first time in his Grand Prix career he's actually found himself out in the first part of qualifying. Agree with you guys. What a session it's been for RB so far. Tsunoda actually ends that session fastest in the middle sector. And I want to take a look at it and just see where that car is plugged in, if we can, because I'm sure it's pretty impressive. Norris fastest in the first and the final, down towards turn 6 then. Car follows the steering wheel nicely for Tsunoda, all looking calm at the moment. And I think they're keeping the tyre in through this middle sector. We saw a couple of onboards from the Ferrari where they're really starting to overheat the rear tyre as they head in towards turn 9 and 10. Lovely balance there for Tsunoda. Follows the steering wheel down towards the apex at 9 and then takes off. See how he can lean on the rear tyre out through 10 and then can be aggressive on the brakes down towards 11 and 12. And then Tsunoda making his way through the exit. So brilliant stuff from them. That really, really boding well, not only for qualifying performance with both cars through to Q3, but also to maintain the performance of the tyre through a race distance, because of course, Sector 2, where all the corners are, no slip means no tyre deg, no tyre deg means speed on Grand Prix Sunday.
It is time for the third part of qualifying. And it has been a weekend of fine margins. We're getting used to that in modern times in Formula One. But intriguingly, it is Max Verstappen instantly out to queue up first. Sometimes he wants to be last, sometimes he wants to be first. There's Carlos Sainz, who will not make Q3 in this round of the championship, the second at 24 in 2025. And he watches his teammate take his place going through. That punch in the air tells you all you need to know about how motivated Alex Albon is. And that's the sort of shot that you see ending up in Drive to Survive, isn't it? When you see a shot of Carlos Sainz watching on with his teammates still taking part when he's off to be weighed.
Yeah, it is exactly as you see there, that your teammate is the great misnomer. His success is your failure, and vice versa. And you can have, and you hope to have, a good working relationship, but do not be under any illusions that there's pleasure to be had in being the second driver in the team.
That P15 for Carlos Sainz, that is his lowest ever start around this circuit. He's raced here 7 times before in Shanghai. A reference for you, McLaren have not scored a top 3 start in Grand Prix qualifying here since Lewis Hamilton left the team at the end of 2012. This time last year they hadn't brought the update that transformed their season, that won them the Constructors' Championship by the time that we got to Abu Dhabi. We have 12 minutes on the board. We have many contenders for pole. It's going to be a strong lap to take the second pole position of the year. A reminder for you, hey, the graphics team have got it as well. Oscar Piastri, he's done it in the sprint format, but never when it comes to the Grand Prix.
Look at those eyes, not even blinking, absolute focus. They're armed with all the information that their team can give them. All the engineering knowledge, all the track knowledge. They know how the track will evolve as you go through the session. Track temperature stable as we go into the later part of the afternoon here. And as I said earlier, it's a pleasure to qualify a Formula One car. There is pressure, of course. When I said there wasn't, of course there is. But that pressure reduces when you're confident that the car will go where you think you want it to be on the racetrack. You're not fighting it. And then if you can get a lap of perfection, of course, the lap time delivers.
So, fascinating stories everywhere we look. Max Verstappen got within 0.02 of a second of sprint pole yesterday, even though he's having to hustle that car in the way that others aren't. This is a replay of a few moments ago. First 2 cars out, Max Verstappen, George Russell heading into turn number 1. Russell not interested in waiting, and he takes his place at the head of the queue.
Yeah, all of those little things have an effect as well. Russell obviously wanted to hustle on. Excuse me, and Max building his lap in a slightly different way. Russell now at turn 12, Verstappen just arriving, as we see there, into turn 11. This is a bigger stop than maybe the camera angle affords us a view, and then this constant roll through onto the long back straight, sector 3 out of 13. Cambered there, really you feel a Grand Prix car, you feel the load building. It is a wonderful feeling.
One thing we have seen in recent times is how much the wind can affect these modern Formula One cars. They are works of art, they are incredibly quick. You're about to watch the fastest times ever set around Shanghai International. But they're very sensitive, DC, and Alex Albon reporting on the radio that the wind has picked up. Lewis Hamilton's Q2 time was near 6.5 tenths of a second slower than his sprint pole time.
Yeah, well, anyone who's flown will know what clear air turbulence feels like in an aircraft. Now, you might think, well, what's that got to do with the Grand Prix car? Well, the Grand Prix car's wings are just inverted instead of going along the runway and creating lift and taking you into the sky, the faster you go, it pushes the car into the tarmac. But any turbulence, any gusting wind has a massive effect in the overall load. And a race car is like a set of scales. If you have a tailwind, it reduces the effect of the rear wing, and it makes the scales tip on the nose and destabilizes the rear. So you're hoping that the racing gods will blow favorably upon you as you deliver the racing, the qualifying lap.
There's the man trying to repeat what he did last year and take Grand Prix pole position. Max Verstappen was alongside his teammate Sergio Perez a year ago. They locked out the front row, part of a dominant run at the start of last year, part of a 4th World Championship campaign. Verstappen was on the front row for sprint qualifying yesterday, didn't have the tyre performance over 19 laps earlier today. He said we're just not there in terms of the tyre life compared to Ferrari and McLaren, but this is low fuel, attacking laps, and the man is trying to add to his collection of Formula One pole positions. Verstappen rotating through the final 2 corners of the racetrack. He will want pole number 41 today, and this is his first effort in Q3 across the line, and he lines up with a 30.9. That's the benchmark for everyone to beat. And Antonelli brushes the gravel as he comes through, losing a huge amount of time as well. That's an opportunity for the likes of Isaac Hadjar. One of the big 4 have had a wide moment. Hadjar goes ahead. He manages to find a time half a second back from Verstappen. That's a good effort. Piastri is fast. Sector 1 and Sector 2. Yuki Tsunoda is behind his rookie teammate after the first push laps in Q3. This is an absolutely scorching pace for a driver who has never taken a Grand Prix pole. Oscar Piastri ahead of Max Verstappen, provisionally to the front of the field. The Ferraris are next up, and then it will be his teammate Lando Norris, who was mighty quick in Q2. Lewis Hamilton, what a weekend he is having so far. What a turnaround. Only 3rd fastest behind the reigning world champion and the Australian McLaren driver. Next up is Charles Leclerc, who on the balance so far this weekend has been the slower of the 2 Ferraris. And the same applies once again. He's 0.3 of a second back from Piastri. What about Lando Norris, though? Can he get on terms? No, he can't, despite the fastest final sector so far. He's 0.09 of a second off McLaren 1-2, but it's Piastri ahead of Norris.
Yeah, and the key to that time right now was that first sector. Piastri really built his lap strongly, and I suspect if you put the best sectors between Piastri and Norris together, we're going to get mid-30s and maybe even more.
There is so much time in that McLaren, but you have to dance on the ragged edge. George Russell was doing the same thing through the final left-hander that completes the lap. He splits the Ferraris. George Russell behind his old teammate, ahead of Charles Leclerc. Isaac Hadjar ahead of Tsunoda. Antonelli knows that if he can avoid the wide moment into the final turn, there's more time as well. And Alex Albon has separated the top 10 at the extremity of Formula One qualifying by a second. That's Antonelli off the road. Time was deleted, but the lap time was lost anyway.
Yeah, just a little bit late on turn into that final corner, and you saw he was over the front tyre, and well, had to lift out, ran the gravel a little bit, but the time, well, it will not count. But he now has a benchmark to aim for. Russell 30.9. He's within a couple of tenths of Piastri, but a couple of thousandths is so difficult to find when you're on the limit.
Lando Norris trying to continue his run of being the lead McLaren on the grid. Last year in the head-to-head, 20 times out of 24 races he was the lead McLaren. Piastri heads him with 1 run to go in Q3. There's not much to find out there, but we will expect the tyres to be their best performance, the track to be rubbered in, the cars to be fastest. It's a 1:30.7, the time to beat.
Was always so impressive. Once you get into this final part of qualifying, the track is as rubbered in as it's going to be. This is where you really start to see what are the teams able to deliver. Maximum everything. And now the top 10 is covered by a second, where earlier in the first part of qualifying, the whole grid was covered by just over a second.
Oscar Piastri currently on provisional pole, yet to take a pole position for a Grand Prix. He has qualified on the front row 7 times, the most for any driver without a pole since the founder of his team, Bruce McLaren, who was racing in the 60s, set up this team that David has raced for in Formula One, that returned to the top of the world with the championship win last year, and they currently have a 1-2 at the head of the field. Norris will be desperate to keep Piastri in the column of front row and not Grand Prix pole winners.
And Piastri desperate to get his elbows out within the team and establish a pole position that then gives him so much opportunity in tomorrow's Grand Prix. He had enough in Melbourne of following the gearbox of his teammate, wasn't happy being told to hold station through the traffic, and well, he can right all those wrongs here.
He was absolutely distraught with how things unfolded in the final stages. A strong second, wanted the chance to race his teammate all the way to the end. The intervention of that rain shower changing everything. The Australian crowd cheering him back into the race. Somehow he recovered to score points with a great move on the last lap past Lewis Hamilton. Can McLaren convert what they have managed to put on the board with run 1? This is Max Verstappen and the Racing Bulls. He's having to take avoiding action. Isaac Hadjar joins the fast lane.
Yeah, well, Racing Bulls are very much, of course, in it to win it, but Max probably, as that's his sister team, will be thinking, right, get out of my way.
Well, he's not far off. He could easily improve up to provisional pole here. As we've seen before, 0.2 of a second, that is surmountable. We are about to set our grid for the second Grand Prix of the year. There is a comparison between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, the 2 racing rivals who started on the front row for the sprint race, our first of the year, earlier on, 19 laps, and it wasn't the type of performance that Verstappen wanted, and he's currently chasing Isaac Hadjar around. Something about the way this car's lined up to suggest that might change by the time. Yeah, there you go, and Isaac Hadjar wisely gets out of the way.
Yeah, I was beginning to wonder whether Max was going to see that as an opportunity, given the Racing Bulls being competitive, whether he would take a distant tow. Any help that you can get can make a difference, but in the end, well, Max plows his own furrow. He's going to have a completely clear track ahead to Antonelli, who's just about to launch his, what will be, if he gets a clean lap, his only timed lap of this qualifying session.
2-minute warning on the board for Q3. These are the final runs in Grand Prix qualifying to decide the top 10 for the second round of the year in the Formula One World Championship. We're setting flying laps at Shanghai International. Max Verstappen closes the DRS and sends the car into the seemingly never-ending turn number 1. He's looking to improve by over 0.2 of a second and put the pressure on the 2 McLarens.
Tidy enough, doesn't look spectacular, but that's exactly how you want to get through 1 and 2. Just keep the car rolling, small improvement in sector.
That's enough, that's all he needs. The driver that missed out by less than 0.02 of a second is 0.03 of a second up on the first effort of Oscar Piastri through the first third of the racetrack. The fast stuff of 8 and 9 falls away. It's all about the 90-degree turns of 9 and 10. Verstappen with a clean lap, and he needs it at the moment. Second sector is not an improvement. He's got 0.1 of a second to find.
Yeah, it didn't look as if he was particularly bad in that middle sector, but as you say, hasn't improved, which he gets that information, that feedback, every 10 metres. His lap delta is being updated on his steering, so he'll be watching that as he piles it down towards the big stop at 14. It's like a sledgehammer hitting the back of your head, over 5G of deceleration.
No personal best for Lando Norris in the middle part of the lap. Antonelli improves up to 7th position, but we're focusing on pole position. Leaning on the curb, giving it everything. Can Verstappen find his way to an improvement? The answer's no. He stays in 3rd. Next up, Isaac Hadjar in the Racing Bulls climbs back past Antonelli to P7. A great effort from him, but what about Lando Norris? He's got one corner to go and he's bailed out of it. That middle sector wasn't enough. He wasn't improving, and now it's over to the Ferraris. Piastri on provisional pole. Can Hamilton snatch it away at the end? There's no improvement for him, and there's no one out there who's going to be challenging the man from Melbourne who's pushing on, trying to find something extra. He does improve his time. Piastri on pole for a Formula One Grand Prix. The man from Melbourne, after the misery a week ago, has found his way back, and it's personal best in Sector 1 and Sector 2 for George Russell. It's an ordinary middle part of the lap for Charles Leclerc, who cannot find the balance his teammate has had. Let's see whether he can find something in the final sector that changes all of that. The answer is no. The track is not there. The drivers cannot find any performance. Can George Russell change that narrative at the end and get ahead of his old teammate? That will surely be his aim. He comes across the line and he gets to the front row. What a magic effort from George Russell. In the end, he only missed out on 0.08 of a second. He split the two McLarens. He's got to the front row, and George Russell finds a brilliant time. But Piastri's was even better. For the first time in Formula One, it's Grand Prix pole for Oscar Piastri, and he will lead the line for the second Grand Prix of the year.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic performance from Piastri. When others were struggling to find any lap time, he pulled it together and cemented an even better lap. And what about Russell's lap as well? That front row is a story of brilliance.
I think that was the hairpin of my life.
Yeah, that was some good stuff there. So that is P1. P1, well done, mate. Pole position. Great job.
Very nicely done. Thank you. I just had a little scream in my helmet, so I'll not burst your eardrums, but thanks everyone. It was a bit of a journey to get there, but well done. Very, very good.
He's taken sprint poles and Grand Prix victory, but this is his first true pole position. Piastri beats George Russell, his teammate, the world champion, and the man who won the sprint race earlier on. And he's done it by the margin, very nearly the margin he missed out on yesterday. 0.08 of a second. And now there have been 107 drivers in World Championship history to take a Formula One pole. You are looking at the most recent, and his name is Oscar Jack Piastri. They're all chasing him into turn number 1 tomorrow.
Yeah, sitting in the car, savouring the moment. And Lando, well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster this weekend, hasn't it, of emotions. And in the end, he wasn't able, either in sprint qualifying or main qualifying, to get clean laps, showing how difficult these cars are to just get and extract all of the performance. And what a cool cat Oscar Piastri is. He goes, this is me happy, this is me sad. Spot the difference.
He might scream into the helmet with joy, but he won't let us hear it. He'll tell us about it, but he plays his cards close to his chest. He is a rapid customer, and now he will have George Russell alongside him 8 meters further back. The top 4 separated by just over 1.5 tenths, under 0.2 of a second between Verstappen in 4th and a maiden pole position for Oscar Piastri, who beat George Russell, who had that option yesterday, didn't put it together. I think he'll be very satisfied with that performance at the end. No purple sectors, but a personal best in all 3 to climb to the front row.
Yeah, Oscar may have done the hairpin of his life, but we'll hear from George in his own words, but he's got to rate that as one of the laps of his life, to pull that performance when no one else was finding lap time.
Yeah, absolutely excellent. Piastri, Russell, Norris, then Verstappen. Hamilton, a dominant winner of the sprint race, down in 5th. 6th place for Charles Leclerc. 7th for Isaac Hadjar, who outqualifies his experienced teammate Yuki Tsunoda. Then Antonelli, Tsunoda and Albon. I think Oscar Piastri said he was 2 tenths down before the hairpin. We'll have to see that once again. He was kicking up the dust on the apex on the way through before. It's going to be some interesting tale being told to Jolyon Palmer down in Parc Fermé.
Well, Lando, you're back in the top 3, but I sense you're a little bit disappointed with that one. Not able to hook up the final lap. How was it for you out there?
Yeah, I mean, always disappointed if I'm not on pole, but Oscar deserves it today. He's done a very good job all weekend, so happy for him, his first pole in Formula 1, so it's always cool. Yeah, just a couple of mistakes again. Kind of been my case this weekend, but the car was feeling a bit better today. I felt a lot more comfortable with the car, so a step in the right direction, especially from yesterday where I was struggling a lot, and even this morning I was struggling a lot. A much better direction that we're going in, so yeah, not too disappointed.
And we're seeing so much pace from you so far this season, but we are seeing a few laps not completed quite as you would want them. A couple of errors here or there you allude to. Is the car really tricky to drive at the moment? Is it difficult to get it on the knife edge, just absolutely spot on?
I mean, yeah, I've said that plenty of times, so it is. It's so quick enough, you know, we never doubted that it's the quickest car. It can just be a little bit feisty at times, but no, today is not so much that. Today was just mistakes from my side, and that's all.
And in terms of a race, you had the sprint earlier, didn't go your way at all, but can you learn from that? Did you change the car much? How are you feeling for tomorrow?
Yeah, we changed quite a lot on the car because we were nowhere, and yeah, we worked quite hard to make some improvements into quali and hopefully for the race tomorrow, so we'll see.
All right, good luck for tomorrow, Lando.
Thank you.